Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you are all doing well. And let's start with a few minutes of silence to settle down our minds and get into a good state. So just take a few moments to relax in a comfortable but good position for listening, for learning. Try to keep your back straight. Let your mind settle down. Put aside any thoughts that might be running around in your mind, left over from what you were doing before coming to class. So just be aware of your breathing flowing in and flowing out. That can help your mind to settle down in the present moment, present place. And then bring into your mind thoughts of kindness, compassion, concern for other people and the world, wanting to help as much as you can. To be able to help others, we need to help ourselves. We need to make some changes in our own mind, decreasing, overcoming delusions, disturbing states of mind, and increase positive states of mind. And so within the Buddhist teachings, we find a lot of material, a lot of methods with which we can do that. And that's particularly what we're focusing on in this class, looking at the afflictive emotions that cause suffering for ourselves and others, and how we can work on them, decrease them. So really try to feel that you're looking at this material, learning about it, not only for your own benefit, but for the benefit of others. Bring more peace and happiness to others and to the world. Okay, so today we will look at ignorance, which is considered the main root affliction, this delusion. And we'll also start looking at arrogance or pride, which is another common affliction. So, with regard to ignorance, it's somewhat complex because even within Buddhism, there are different ways of explaining ignorance. There's different philosophical schools, and how they define ignorance and explain ignorance can vary from one to another. And so, in your book, in the box which explains ignorance, it says, ignorance is an afflictive state of unknowing brought about by the mind's lack of clarity regarding the nature of things such as the Four Truths, the Three Jewels, and karma and its effects. And then it goes on to say it's the root of all the other afflictions. So, desire, anger, jealousy, and so on. All other afflictive emotions are rooted in ignorance. And also the actions that we do, the karma that we create under the influence of afflictions, which are the cause of suffering, unfortunate rebirths and future lives, and so on. Those are all rooted in ignorance. So ignorance is plays a very important role in our suffering. It's the root of all suffering. And this explanation here of ignorance is a general explanation, which all the Buddhist schools would agree on. They all agree that we have this kind of ignorance, which doesn't know the true nature of things. So sometimes it's called confusion or bewilderment. So it's just a state of not being clear, not seeing things as they are. And but then within each system, each of the different Buddhist philosophical schools, there are additional explanations of ignorance, different kinds of ignorance. So it's a bit complex. And so here in your book, there is a list of some different kinds of ignorance and the roles that they play. So the first one on the list, the first bullet point, is ignorance of karma and its effects. And this plays a crucial role because when people have this kind of ignorance, they don't know what kind of karma they're creating. They do actions, they just feel the impulse to do something, and they do it without knowing what kind of results will come, what kind of consequences they will experience as a result of that. But here in the explanation, it says, this is not simply not knowing about karma and effects, because, for example, little children who've never haven't yet started going to school and learning things, they would be ignorant. They just don't know about karma if nobody has told them. So it's not that kind of ignorance, but it's either a strong disbelief in karma. So you might have heard about karma, but you reject it. You just say, oh no, that's impossible. No way. I don't believe that. I don't accept that. So that's one way that people might have this kind of ignorance. Or it says, or temporary disregard for it. So we might have heard about ignorance. We might have heard about karma, and we might believe in it, but we might find ourselves in a situation where we really, really want to do something. We have a strong wish to do something, a strong desire to do something. And even though we may have heard that this is a negative action, it's a negative karma, but we just kind of push that thought aside. We think, no, never mind. And we just go ahead and do it anyway. So this is something that can happen. And so with this ignorance, we're not able to discern, to differentiate what is virtuous and what is non-virtuous, or it doesn't believe, it doesn't accept that our actions do lead to results. Non-virtuous actions bring suffering, actions bring happiness. So we don't believe that. Then it gives an example here. For example, under the influence of this ignorance, we don't see the faults of engaging in business deals that deprive others of what is rightly theirs. So that's just one example. But nowadays, there's so many. Every day in the newspaper, we hear stories about people doing things that are wrong, that are harmful, that are dishonest, corrupt, and so on. And in some cases, these actions bring a great deal of suffering to others. That's in the immediate sense. But according to Buddhism, if they are doing these non-virtuous actions, then they're also creating suffering for themselves later on in the future. In this life or in a future life, they are going to experience suffering. So anyway, that's one form of ignorance about karma, cause and effect. For example, where I live, I think I mentioned this to you, or I don't know. There are people around here who go hunting. It's kind of a rural area. And many of our neighbors, although they're not close, thank goodness, but they have guns and they like to go into the forest and shoot deer and other creatures. And they probably think, oh, this is pleasurable. This is a good thing to do. This is cool. I can feel satisfied when I manage to kill a deer, and then we can take it home and eat it for dinner. So I think this is an example of this kind of ignorance. They simply don't realize that what they're doing is wrong, that they're creating suffering for the animals they kill, but also for themselves. So this is a big factor in samsara. People, beings, just doing negative actions, thinking it's okay or thinking they'll get away with it. There's no problem, and they're just creating the cause for themselves to suffer over and over and over again. And then the next kind of ignorance is said, ignorance that is one of the three poisons. So you've probably heard this expression, the three poisons, many times. So these are the three main afflictive states of mind: ignorance, attachment, and anger or hatred. So within that group of three, the ignorance here is the same as above. It's the ignorance of karma and its effects. Okay. So you might wonder, well, why do we have to repeat this again? We already looked at it in number 1. However, some people are not clear about that. When you see that expression, the three poisons, greed, hatred, ignorance, some people think ignorance there refers to ignorance about the true nature of things. For example, ignorance thinking there's a real inherently existing I, a real self, a real I. But it's not. In the context of the three poisons, ignorance there is just the ignorance about karma. I hope this isn't too confusing for you, but remember, Buddha taught a long time, 45 years, as a huge collection of his teachings. And then since then, over the last 2,500 years, many other Buddhist masters have written texts, have taken the Buddha's words and then wrote commentaries on them, and so on. So there's lots of opportunities for different perspectives to arise, but also the Buddha himself, he himself gave many different teachings. So, and then the commentators just tried to unravel what he was saying and explain it. So when you do come to study Buddhism and you read different books, different texts, and so on, you do come across the word ignorance. And it's just useful to know that the word ignorance doesn't always have the exact same meaning in every context. So I was quite helpful. I was quite happy when I came across this explanation of the different kinds of ignorance. The next one is ignorance that is the first link of dependent origination. So this is referring to the 12 links. You've had an explanation of the 12 links, I think, from Venerable Yunten. Okay, so the first of the 12 links is ignorance. Okay, so what kind of ignorance is that? And here you have different explanations by the different schools. I won't go into all of them, but we usually follow the Prasangika, Madhyamaka Prasangika school. That's the school that teaches emptiness of inherent existence. So according to that school, the Prasangika school, ignorance, which is the first of the 12 links, is ignorance about our own self, I, not understanding the real nature of ourself, but thinking, believing we exist inherently. There's an inherently existing, independently existing I. Okay, so that specific kind of ignorance is the one that starts the whole 12 links. Based on believing in an inherently existing I, we then do actions, which is link number 2. We create karma, and then that karma sets in motion all the other links. The other of the 12 links, causing a rebirth and then a whole new life within samsara and so on. Then the next one is ignorance of selflessness. Ignorance of selflessness. And this is common to all Buddhist schools. All Buddhist schools except that we are ignorant about ourself, the I, me, who I am, what I am. So, but how they explain selflessness would differ from one school to another. We won't go into that. You've probably heard something about that before. But again, according to the Prasangikas, ignorance of selflessness means thinking we have a real inherently existing I, self, me. And in fact, such a self doesn't exist. But Prasangikas also say we have ignorance with regard to all other things besides ourselves. So all other people, all other living beings, and all other material things, and everything, whatever exists. We see all of these things in a mistaken way. We see them as inherently existing when in fact they're not. But the main kind of ignorance is about our own self, our own I, because that's there with us 24/7, and it motivates the actions that we do, and actions we do under the influence of ignorance become the cause for further suffering within samsara, being stuck in samsara. So that's the main one we have to overcome.
What is the difference between this one and the previous one? I didn't understand.
Well, according to the Prasangika, it would be the same. Yeah, from the point of view of the Prasangika school, it would be the same. However, for other Buddhist schools, there would be a difference between those two. But I don't want to get into that. It's too complicated. In fact, I took this material from a book, what's it called? Samsara Nirvana Buddha Nature. So it's one of those books which is the Library of Wisdom and Compassion. So I took this from that book. And in fact, there were a total of 9 different explanations of ignorance. But I didn't take all 9 of them because I thought that would be too complicated for you. So I just took 4 or 5. But don't worry about all of this. Just try to understand that the word ignorance, when you come across the word ignorance in Buddhist books or Buddhist teachings, it doesn't always have the same meaning. And so you might have to do some investigation to figure out what is the meaning of ignorance in this situation, in this context. It's a little complicated, I'm sorry to say. But for scholars, for people who really want to go in depth into Buddhist philosophy and so on, this kind of thing is quite useful. Then the last bullet point says, in the Pali tradition, that means the Theravada tradition, ignorance is explained as not knowing the 4 truths, not knowing past and future lives, not knowing dependent origination. So just not understanding the situation that we are in samsara, how we cycle through death and rebirth and all the different kinds of experiences in samsara, just not knowing about that. And so because of not knowing how we are stuck in samsara, then we just keep circling, spinning in samsara. So we need to understand these things like the 4 truths, karma, reincarnation, dependent origination, and so on. Okay, then the next part says, according to the Prasangikas, ignorance grasps persons and phenomena as inherently existing. So according to the school we follow in our tradition, the Prasangika school, mainly when they talk about ignorance, they're mainly talking about ignorance about the true nature of things, the ultimate nature of things, believing everything to be inherently existing. So they say that's the main ignorance. That's the most problematic ignorance that needs to be overcome if we want to be free of samsara and all the suffering, all the problems. So I hope this isn't too confusing for you, but like I said, just try to keep in mind that within Buddhism, the word ignorance can mean different things. And mainly, I mean, so far in your studies, when you've heard ignorance explained, it's probably this kind of ignorance, the ignorance that believes in an inherently existing I, inherently existing others, inherently existing phenomena. And that's the main kind of ignorance that we have to overcome. So let's go down to antidotes to ignorance. So what do we do about it? How do we get free of ignorance? So this is probably not new to you. The opposite of ignorance is wisdom. Wisdom that understands correctly how things exist. And this wisdom is cultivated gradually through a 3-fold process. The first one is just hearing, learning, and studying a topic in the teaching. So we have to first listen to teachings, or study them on our own, just to acquire the information, the correct explanation of things. And this leads to a kind of wisdom which is called the wisdom of hearing. So there's three different kinds of wisdom that are related to these three steps. The first is wisdom of hearing, which is simply, okay, I've heard about karma, for example. I heard teachings on karma, and it means this and that and so on. So we just get the initial knowledge about a particular topic. Then the second step is reflection or contemplation or thinking. So this involves thinking about it, what we've learned on our own. We can also debate, discuss with others. And in this way, we gain another kind of wisdom, which is called the wisdom of reflection or the wisdom of thinking. So after hearing about a topic like karma, then you think about it. And you might come up with questions. You ask your teacher, you ask older students your questions, you discuss it with others. So gradually your knowledge grows more and more, it becomes more like understanding rather than simply knowing words. You have a deeper understanding of it. Then the third step is meditating, which leads to the wisdom of meditation. So after the first two steps, we meditate on what we know, for example, meditating on karma. And by meditating, hopefully with good concentration, you'll get an even deeper understanding of this topic, such that it brings about a change in the way you do things and the way you live. Like if you really deeply think about karma and meditate on karma, you'll want to live according to karma. You'll want to stop creating negative karma, and you'll want to create virtuous karma as much as you can. So meditating on it is what really brings about a big change in our attitudes and our way of living and so on. So those three steps are followed with regard to all the teachings, like karma, Four Noble Truths, but especially emptiness. So that's the most important kind of wisdom we want to develop, wisdom of emptiness. So we have to go through these three steps: listening, or for learning, and then thinking about it, and then meditating on it in order to gain a real realization of emptiness. So this is what you've been doing in this course, the Buddhist part of your human spirit program. So you've been learning about Buddhist teachings and then thinking about them, discussing them, asking questions about them, and sometimes meditating on them. So this is a really important part of cultivating wisdom. And the more we can cultivate wisdom, then our ignorance decreases. Yeah.
Can I ask you where the guru is inside these three steps?
Well, traditionally, one in Buddhism, one learns the Dharma from a teacher. That there's a lot of emphasis on not just reading books, acquiring information from books, but having a teacher that first you meet the teacher and you get to know the teacher, you listen to the teacher and so on. You have to investigate them. But yeah, it's considered very important to have that kind of oral transmission of the teachings from a real life teacher. And so somebody who's seriously following this path, the Buddhist path, would have at least one teacher that they rely on to learn from. And also, if you have the chance to ask them questions to clear up your doubts and so on. So, and then, it's also important for your own development that you have respectful attitudes towards your teacher. You really respect your teacher. And so you heard the teachings on what's sometimes called guru devotion or reliance on a teacher. I think that was Venerable Amy. No, was it? No, I'm thinking of cohort 1. Sorry. I think cohort 1 had those teachings with Venerable Amy. I think that comes in year 6 of your program. So maybe you haven't yet kind of learned much about that particular topic, but yeah. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Yeah, because like the Buddha himself, at the time of the Buddha, nothing was written down. There were no books. So if people wanted to learn Buddhism, they had to learn it from a teacher. And it was only after 300 years after the Buddha passed away that the teachings were written down. So for that first 300 years, they were transmitted orally. So the only way you could learn was from a teacher. So these 3 steps of learning, thinking, and meditating is something we continue doing all our life. I've heard my teachers, the lamas, the geshis, they usually spend about 20 years studying in the monasteries, and then they start to teach or they go into retreat. But they don't stop learning just when they've completed their monastic education. They continue learning. Even in their 80s and 90s, they're still, most of the time they're reading their texts, studying, and memorizing their texts, or thinking about them, meditating on them. So it's an ongoing process. Okay, so that's a little bit about ignorance. Next is number 4. The 4th of the 6 root afflictions is arrogance or pride. Normally it's called pride, but I think the word arrogance is perhaps better. I don't know how it works in Hebrew, but in English, pride doesn't always have a negative connotation. For example, a parent will talk about having pride in their child because of accomplishing something. So it's not necessarily a negative thing. Whereas the word arrogance in English does have a negative connotation. When we say somebody is arrogant, that's not a compliment. That's not something we admire in people. Okay, so the description here in the box is arrogance is a mental factor that, based on the view of a personal identity that misapprehends how the I or mine exists, strongly grasps an inflated image of ourselves. So it's based on this is another mental factor, the view of a personal identity. This is actually going to come later. But view of a personal identity is just the view of our own self, our own I. And according to the Prasangikas, it's thinking I inherently exist. Okay, so it's a state of mind that thinks, believes, I am an inherently existing person. I inherently exist. So based on that, which is a wrong view, it's a mistaken view, then we kind of have a very puffed up, inflated image of ourselves, thinking I'm more important than I really am. So it's a strong sense of self-importance. But it's based on an illusion, a delusion. I was thinking of that fairy tale or that story about the emperor. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Anyway, The Emperor's New Clothes, something like that, where a tailor tricks him into thinking that he has this new set of clothing, which is so beautiful and so magnificent, but actually nothing is there. So he's walking around in his underwear thinking, oh, I look so great, I look so wonderful. But in fact, he's almost naked. And everyone's laughing at him. So it's a bit like that, we based on a completely false, illusory sense of I, self, me, then we go around thinking, I am so great, I am so wonderful. And so arrogance is a kind of obstacle or hindrance to learning. It says it prevents us from learning and increasing our virtue and causes us to disrespect or denigrate others. So those are faults of arrogance. It's an obstacle to learning, because if we think, I am so great, I'm so wonderful, we don't think we need to learn anything. And we might even look down on teachers. We find fault in teachers who could teach us and help us. And then below the box, it says Vasubandhu mentions 7 types of arrogance. Maybe I won't go through all of these. You can read these on your own, but there's different varieties of arrogance. Mainly they involve thinking I'm great, thinking I'm superior to others. And some, like one form of ignorance is even taking, we're actually degenerate, somebody who's actually quite degenerate and does a lot of non-virtuous actions and has a lot of delusions in their mind. And yet they think they're wonderful and perfect and pure. So that's a particularly damaging kind of arrogance, because there you are going around with all these deluded attitudes and doing harmful things, but you don't even recognize it. And you even think, I'm great, I'm wonderful. So yeah, I'd like to spend more time on the what do you call it? Antidotes to arrogance. What can we do about arrogance? Oh yeah, there's one little paragraph where it starts, it is important to discriminate between arrogance and self-confidence. Arrogance is often a cover for insecurity, whereas self-confidence acknowledges our abilities without inflating them. Okay, so those two states of mind are not the same. I tend to think one way to differentiate them is with arrogance, we usually compare ourselves with others and decide, I am better, I am superior, I am smarter, I am more attractive, I am better at this and that. So we hold ourselves higher than, better than others. Whereas with self-confidence, we don't do that. We're just in touch with our abilities, our qualities, and it's realistic. I mean, if we do have those good qualities, and if we do have good, certain abilities, then that's just a realistic attitude, and we don't have to compare ourselves with others and think I'm better than them. We just know I am able to do this. So, for example, as a psychotherapist, a psychoanalyst, you've studied, you've gained a lot of experience, you've had success, at least with some of your patients, maybe not all, but you've had some success in your work. And so you can feel confident that you have the ability to practice as a psychotherapist, a psychoanalyst. Okay. So, and myself, I've studied Buddhism and I've taught Buddhism a long time. So I have a certain amount of confidence that I can do it. So that's self-confidence. And I don't have to think I am better than others. That's when it becomes arrogance. Whereas just being confident in our abilities is not a negative thing. And in fact, we need it. We need self-confidence in our work, but also on the spiritual path, especially the bodhisattva's path, the path of the bodhisattva, because a bodhisattva, thinks, I want to become enlightened, to help all living beings. So you have to have strong self-confidence that you can do that, right? To be able to follow the bodhisattva's path, you really have to feel, I can do it. I am going to do it. So if you have weak self-confidence, you think, oh, I'm hopeless. I could never do that. I can't change myself. So we need self-confidence in our spiritual practice, but also in our life, to do our job, to be a therapist, to be a parent, to be a football player, whatever. We need to feel confident in ourselves. Then there's a paragraph that says, arrogance can sometimes be subtle and difficult to recognize. And this is just something I came to on my own, thinking about myself, my own experience. I came up with this list of symptoms that might indicate the presence of pride or arrogance in our mind. So the first one is if we're critical and judgmental of others, which I have that habit, critical of others, I think that's a sign of arrogance, because we feel, oh, I don't have that bad quality. That person is like that, but I'm not like that. So it's like feeling superior to that person. The next one, we feel unhappy when we're not number one. I have to be the best. I mean, this is something each person has to check for themselves. If they do have that tendency, to check what's that all about? Where's that coming from? And you might notice that it's arrogance. I have to be the best. I have to be number one. Then we feel jealous of those who do better, who have more. So that could also be a sign of arrogance. I want to be number one, so I can't stand it that someone is better than me or has more than me or looks better than me or whatever. The next one, we feel angry when we don't receive the respect we think we deserve. So if you do find yourself feeling that way, if someone isn't treating you with respect, then just check. It may not be due to arrogance, but that's something we have to determine for ourselves. If we do have a strong sense of arrogance and self-importance, then we might have, everybody should respect me, everybody should treat me in a certain way. And if they don't, I have the right to be angry at them and mistreat them. So it's possible that that is a sign of arrogance. Next one, we feel angry when criticized. So again, that's similar. We feel depressed about our mistakes and faults and so on. So I'm saying this, that, these are just possible indications of arrogance, but may not be. Because I once had the experience, I was teaching a group of people about Buddhism, introduction to Buddhism, and I talked about these. And afterwards, this young woman asked to talk to me, and she was actually kind of upset by what I said. And she explained to me that her father had been a very highly critical person who was never pleased with her. Like, no matter what she ever did, he was never pleased. He was never satisfied. He was very demanding and having a lot of expectations of her. So she felt like, whatever I do, it's never good enough. And so she saw some of these symptoms in herself, but she was kind of upset by my suggestion that it could be due to pride or self-importance, because she thought it was more to do with her relationship with her father. And, feeling I have to be number one, I have to do better, and so on and so forth. So in her case, I said, well, maybe that's true. Maybe it's not because of pride. Maybe it's because of your upbringing, your relationship with your father. So that's something each person has to check for themselves. If they do have these kind of symptoms, what is the cause? What is the reason? What lies behind it? Is it arrogance? Is it a strong sense of self-importance? Or is it due to other factors? Because like I say, sometimes it can be difficult to recognize pride or arrogance. It may be there, but we're kind of blind to it. We're aware of it. Does that make sense?
We have here a very strong storm outside, so we are kind of not peaceful.
We are agitated.
Thunder,
lightning.
Thunder and lightning.
We
Oh,
are very excited.
I see. So is it hard for you to hear?
We're in the desert, so we are very excited when we have the rain.
and also afraid how we will get home.
It's an exception in Israel. The wind is very strong, so
Yeah.
They even gave the storm a name.
But it's probably good to have the rain, right? You need the rain.
yeah, we are really happy.
But when there's
Some of us.
We're happy and we're not.
when there's too much rain, it's also dangerous. I remember one time when I was there was a strong rain and there was a flash flood in the desert, and all these young people, they were hiking in the desert and they got killed. That was terrible. Really, really.
I wanted to say about what you said. I also thought about the groups that were oppressed, and like the gay community that call themselves Pride Parade, and also Black is Beautiful, and that maybe it can be part of a process to feel proud after being oppressed.
Yeah, that's true. But again, I would say that what's needed there is to develop self-confidence, confidence in ourselves, not believe in the oppressors, what the oppressors have been telling you and how they've been treating you, not believing in that, but believing I am a good person. I do have good qualities. I can, live in this world and be myself and not feel ashamed. So that's more like self-confidence. But what can happen is sometimes the oppressed turn into oppressors themselves. I'm sure you're aware of that it can turn the other way. And then you start feeling, I am better than them, and you're putting down them, and so on. So it can so easily slip into that. And
I wonder, SK, as a cohort did talked about arrogance, that can be, or
I heard that.
internalize or projected outside. Okay, so it can it can look as if he's arrogant. It could be as a lot of pride. It could look like he has no confidence and low self-esteem. It's also arrogance that he's projecting outside. But according to Court, you need the other person, the self-object, to see your needs and your grandiosity can settle down. But you are taking another path of learning about ignorance, right? It is completely another path. So you can get rid of your ignorance with no person at all.
Self-objective. The Dharma. Yeah, the Dharma is a self-object.
You can get it all by yourself.
I didn't completely understand your question. Some of the words were not clear. Can you summarize it?
And so, so according to Heinz cohort, okay, the psychoanalytic Heinz cohort said you need a self-object, right? In order to get rid of your arrogance, right? There are two types of arrogance, okay? But you need a person, but you're talking about the Dharma as curing your ignorance, and therefore you want to be arrogant. So is it really, as you understand, possible only to learn the Dharma and contemplate and meditate, and you can do it without a guru? Also, you can say the self-object is only the Dharma itself, not a person, to get rid of the ignorance. I'm asking.
So your question is it possible to follow the spiritual path on your own without a teacher and be able to overcome your ignorance? Is that what you're asking? Yes. Just do your own study, your own reflection, your own meditation. Traditionally, they say no, it's not possible. Anyone who has ever attained enlightenment, like the Buddha and all the others who have attained enlightenment, and also nirvana, those who have attained nirvana, they all relied on a teacher, at least at some time, at least in the beginning. Maybe later they went off and practiced on their own, but at least in the beginning, one does need to have contact with a teacher who shows you the Dharma, inspires you, helps you understand, your own potential. So yeah, it's said that having a teacher is essential to go all the way to enlightenment. I know for myself, sometimes I struggle with that because I like to be independent. But on the other hand, when I ask myself my own experience, if I had just read books about Buddhism or looked at videos, on the internet and so on, I don't think I would be able to make the same kind of progress. But having the chance to meet real teachers, living teachers who embody the qualities that are described in the Buddhist teachings, it's just so, it's like another whole dimension that you just don't get from books or even from watching someone on a video on the internet. And also the interaction, the personal interaction with teachers, something very, very important. Is that answering your question? I'm not sure if I understand.
Yes, I think it's very important for us that the Dharma is not only a conceptual, a theory that we can rely on. The teacher, the guru, is very important. For me, the bodily transmission is very, very important. It was like pinpointing for me, okay? And then, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say my own experience. I mean, when you read books about Dharma books, you read about these different kinds of qualities like compassion and kindness and wisdom, but they're just words. And it's difficult to understand what those words actually mean until you have a chance to meet a person who is embodying those qualities. And then they become alive. And then it's like you understand, oh, that's what compassion is. When you see a person behaving in a compassionate way, having a compassionate look on their face, then it's like that word compassion becomes alive, becomes real, rather than just something abstract. And maybe you have some idea what it means, but not really until you see it in action in real life. So I think, having living teachers is very, very, very important. So you're saying Kohat says the same thing, that it's necessary to have a self-object to be able to transform oneself.
An ideal self-object, which is kind of a teacher, a parent, a guru, a analyst.
Yeah.
I say it with humbleness, right? But has to obtain some of these qualities.
Yeah. So anyway, and the point here is that in order to make this transformation possible, we need humility. The opposite of arrogance is humility. Humility, being humble in the face of our spiritual teachers and our spiritual friends, and in fact towards everybody, towards all people and all beings. We can learn from everyone, even from a dog, from a cat. If we have humility, we have a humble, open mind, then we can learn from anyone. But if we have arrogance, pride, it sort of closes us. Our mind closes to that possibility of learning from others. So we didn't have time to go through the antidotes, but in the meditation, you'll do a meditation on Wednesday. So in that meditation, we can do them, meditate on the antidotes to arrogance. So before Wednesday, if you could just read through those again, just to familiarize yourself with them, and then we'll do a meditation on them for Wednesday. So we've come to the end of our time. Let's just take a moment to make a mental dedication of the positive energy that we've created during this hour, this class. May this benefit all living beings. May it help all living beings become free of their delusions, especially ignorance and arrogance and so on. Okay, thank you.